Exclusive, the host of the Right View podcast, Lara Trump. Lara, good to see you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Maria. Great to be with you.
First, your reaction to the verdict against your family on Friday.
What do you even say to something like this, Maria? This is insane. Obviously, everybody knows that Letitia James ran for Attorney General on a platform of one thing: not protecting the people of the state of New York, not going after actual justice, taking down Donald Trump. She said herself, I look forward to going into the office of Attorney General every day, suing Trump and going home. Judge Engoron made his decision on how he would rule in this case before the first word of the first day of trial was ever spoken. It didn't matter that there was a mountain of evidence to show actually how well run this company truly was, that these banks didn't lose a single dollar. They had to use a fraud statute in New York that didn't require fraud. They had to go so far out of their way. These banks said, not only did we make hundreds of millions of dollars, we wanted to do more business with the Trump organization. And then, of course, every person in this case testified to the fact my husband, Eric, and his brother, Don, had nothing to do with anything alleged here, but slap them in there, give them a $4 million charge as well. It is insane. I think what people have seen with this case is that they are doing everything possible, not just to ensure that Donald Trump doesn't become the 47th president, but to personally destroy him. This company was his life's work. They want to take that down. They want to take down his family. Any collateral damage they can possibly find in the wake of what they want to do to him is great on their side. But people see now, more clearly than ever, that Donald Trump is standing in the gap between us keeping our country together and losing America, losing the America we have always known. He is holding the line. He will not stop. It doesn't matter how much nonsense is thrown his way. Everyone can see how insane this situation truly is.
Lara, I want to move on and get your take on the infrastructure around the Republican Party and whether or not you are about to step up as a co-chair there. What are your expectations here, and what would be the timing of, in fact, you taking a role in the leadership of the RNC?
Well, the committee has to ultimately vote me in. If that's what they decide to do, I would be honored to have this position because, look, Maria, I think there's no time to waste. We have 10 months to go, really, before what I think we can all feel right now in this country is the most important election any of us have ever seen. We are poised to lose the country, like I just said. Everyone sees it. Everyone feels it. The world is destabilized right now because you have bad leadership at the top. We need Donald Trump to be back in that White House. We need to expand our lead in the House. We need to take back the Senate. And you don't win a presidential campaign without the aid of the Republican National Committee. And so if I am chosen as co-chair, what I can tell you is that we really do have a lot of work to get done. Now, there are things that have been done. They have an election integrity division at the RNC that really no one has heard much about. They have 78 lawsuits across the country to overturn those, those laws that were changed during the 2020 election under the guise of COVID that changed how you vote in so many states. They have people who are actually trained poll watchers. These are people who are going to go into precincts, Maria, and not just stand there and watch things happen. They physically can count the ballots coming in and how many ballots are coming out of a precinct. So there's a lot that's been done, but there's a lot to be done. We need the strongest ground game that this country has ever seen. We need to make sure we are doing legal ballot harvesting. That's something we really have never done as Republicans. It's something the Democrats often do, whether it's legal or illegal the way they do it, questionable to some. We will do it the legal way. We need to have an election day operations all across this country like we've never seen. And we need to make sure that nothing is left to chance, that on November 5th of this year, Donald Trump will indeed become the 47th president of the United States.
So I'd like to know what you're planning should you get the opportunity to lead in the RNC, because people are concerned about election integrity. Tell me specifics in addition to that ballot harvesting, things that you think are needed and that you will do to ensure a free and fair election come November.
Well, first of all, I think we need to raise a lot of money. We know the Democrats have a mountain of it right now, and we need to do the same. So I think you need to reestablish that people can feel good about donating to the RNC, which right now some people aren't really sure how is their money being spent. What I can assure you is if I am there, I will make sure that every single penny donated to the RNC goes to electing Donald Trump and, again, extending our lead in the House and taking back the Senate. I think, look, we need poll watchers in places all across this country. If you want to volunteer right now, you can go to donaldjtrump.com and sign up to be a volunteer. The truth is we really need to have people in place, legal people in place on Election Day, so that if there are any challenges, anything questionable at all, we are ready to strike at a moment's notice. And we really have to hit this thing head on. We have a lot of work to do. There's a little time to go between now and November 5th. And look, we're going to hit the ground running as soon as, and if I am elected as co-chair of the RNC.
And tell me what you've studied from 2020 to be able to take forward for 2024. And do you believe that these judgments against your father-in-law, against President Trump, will in any way stop him or slow him down in terms of running and, as he expects, winning?
Yeah, no, they're not going to slow him down at all. He's probably has the most energy of any person I've ever seen in my life. He's incredible. Nothing will stop him. And look, these are designed to make him rethink what he's doing. Obviously, all of these indictments, well, Donald Trump's going to say, I can't do it. Absolutely not. He's going forward because I think he knows, Maria, he is truly the only person who can do the job that we need to bring this country back, to put us back on the right track, to stabilize the world. We have to play the game differently. I think we've all seen that from 2020 and from years beyond. The Democrats have been playing chess and we have been playing checkers, and we have to reverse those roles. We have to be steps ahead of them and far ahead in the game so that there is no ground to make up. We need people going to early vote. It would be great, Maria, if we had one day of voting in this country. We had paper ballots. Everybody got the day off of work. We don't have that. We have to start banking the votes early. The day that your state allows for early voting, go vote. And then you take people with you every day thereafter to vote. We have to have such a lead going into Election Day that we're not making up ground, that there's no catch up to play, because we know via states like Arizona, sometimes there are problems in the system. Sometimes the lines are very long. Go vote, get people in to vote with you, because really, this is a must-win election for us.
Well, we'll be watching to see if there are efforts to try to muddy up your name as you
stay tuned.
as you move higher to another level in the RNC, Lara. We'll be watching that because I know that has been the case for others. Lara Trump, thank you very much. We'll be watching your work.